too. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to those who are just joining the session. We will get started in just a few minutes to allow everyone who's coming back from the break to get settled in. So now's the time to refresh your tea and your coffee, and come back to the meeting. In the meantime, feel free to drop in the chat what you thought about those pitches. I'm still reverberating with the energy from those 10 finalists, and do not envy the judges who have to choose just one winner. Did any of you act as coaches for your fellows and give feedback on their pitches? I'm seeing a lot of love in the chat. Raul and Miguel Angel have a lot of fans. Elia. Fantastic. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, 2021 YLAI Fellows. Welcome to the first speaker panel of Closing Forum. This is a roundtable discussion on redefining inclusion, and it features insight on overcoming barriers, inclusive business strategies, and confronting inequality as a leader. We are lucky to be joined today by 3 dynamic women representing experiences and who are working on these issues in the United States, in Canada, and in Latin America. I'm your moderator, Jennifer Fox, Senior Program Officer for the YLAI team at IREX, and I'll be directing questions to our distinguished panelists to explore these topics. Your questions are welcome. Please feel free to use the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen in the chat, and we'll save some time for a few questions at the end of the session. And if you want to learn more about our speakers, we'll be posting their links to their relevant websites and social media in the chat, so keep an eye out there. Before we get started with the conversation, I'd like to briefly introduce our 3 speakers. We have with us Dr. Wendy Cukier, who is the founder of Ryerson University's Diversity Institute and one of Canada's leading experts in disruptive technologies, innovation processes, and diversity. She's written more than 200 papers on technology, innovation, and management, and is a recipient of the Governor General's Meritorious Cross, which is one of Canada's highest civilian honors. She was also named as one of Canada's top 25 women of influence. Welcome, Wendy. We also have with us Ana Flores, who is the founder and CEO of #WeAllGrowLatina, the first network of Latina influencers founded in 2010 with a mission to elevate the voices and stories of Latinas throughout the power of community. A thought leader in the areas of representation, Latinx identity, and gender equality, Ana has been recognized by the United Nations Women's LA chapter as a champion of change, and by People en Español as one of las 25 mujeres más poderosas. Welcome to Ana. And we are pleased to have with us Beatrice Adenodi, a marketing guru, founder and CEO of Mirror Inc., which is a business consulting firm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the founder of Mindless Behaviors, a social experiential platform. She is also the author of Mindless Behavior, Breaking Through Unseen Barriers, where she draws upon her own experiences as a first-hand generation Nigerian-American immigrant entrepreneur. So a warm welcome to Wendy, Ana, and Beatrice. We are thrilled to have you here with us to engage on this important topic. And I thought we could start the conversation first with Beatrice. And I'm hoping what you can do is share a little bit with our audience about Mindless Behaviors and what really planted the seed to start this platform and kind of how it works.
Great, thank you for having me. So the genesis of Mindless Behaviors came to me like over 7 years ago. I was overworked. I was like, my relationships were suffering. I owned my business, Mirror Inc., and I was looking to give it off. So I was in a crossroads. So it was like a transition. One of the biggest things I realized is that we had a lot of, through my work experience, I've been in marketing for 20 years. I noticed that there's like different patterns that I realized across the board, personally, professionally, and even like in the social setting. So it got me to the brink. One morning, I discussed it in my book that um, I literally just I just broke down and I started writing, and it started flowing through me, and started to put everything was coming together on paper. And what I realized and discovered through my journey of mindless behaviors is that we are consciously doing things that we were taught, that we inherited and pick up along the way. And if we don't, sometimes it starts as something really micro and it eventually become macro. And I wanted to shed light on that within my book and also within the platform that I built, which basically moved people from reactive to reflective in their environmental setting. A lot of the issues that happen within our systems is because we are not really we're constantly reacting to it versus reflecting and not really stepping back. And for me to identify those problems and writing a book, I made sure that I gave examples through storytelling and bring people full circle in that sense. So um, it was fun. It was a journey, and I did had some long days and nights that I wrote, but I usually write like between 5 to 7 in the morning. It's crazy.
Wow, thanks for sharing some of the process with us and for kind of defining what mindless behavior has meant to you in your work and how you've started answering questions around it. I was curious, as you were building your platform and writing your book on overcoming unseen barriers, can you talk us through the learning journey? Did you learn anything unexpected as you were writing your book and exploring the platform?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. So one of the things that I've learned is, well, it my suspicions was already within the work I've done in marketing because we all create behaviors. But I learned a lot about what behaviors and shortcomings I had. And believe me, I didn't even think that. I always thought that I was just most judgmental and unbiased, which I am. But there are little things that I do that I was even hard on myself about. And what I do all the time, and I still do it to now, like when when I have my emotions and I don't live there, through the time writing my book, I start to understand the process of like literally like having them leaving, sitting there, but not letting it flow through me. So every time I would have an experience, I like, okay, what am I experiencing? What lesson am I learning? So every year, um, every time I write a story, it was always a lesson and a discovery. It's a discovery process for me. And the end of the book have that it actually I wrote it the day after my experience happened, which led me. That was my ultimate battle because it talked about light versus darkness and how like my family issues basically came to head, and I was writing it as I was experiencing it. So I've learned to write in real time my emotions as it flows.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Um, in terms of any of your mindset or hypotheses about what other people would share with you, were you surprised about anything that came to light in that part of the research and process?
I feel even as yes, in a sense, since I'm a little I'm not judgmental. A lot of people overshare a lot of things with me, so it's kind of fun to hear it. But I am very strategic by nature, and I give them problem solving tools. But what I've learned is people want to be guided on what to do. They don't want to be told what to do. We already naturally are told what to do during our systems. Our systems literally tell us like step one, step two, step three, like constantly living in this slave game, right? So it's like this manufacturing over and over again. With me, I said, no, just step back from it. Let's really think about the situation. Don't panic. And like, let's find little ultimate solutions because for every one problem, there's 10 different solutions to get to that, to get to the goal that you want.
Mhm. Great, thank you. I love that the concept of being guided through and having the tools and the conversations around it. to guide people to where they need to be. I think we're going to leave you with this question, which is, can you share a little bit about your personal vision for people, perhaps for business leaders, since that's who our fellows comprise, that's who's in the audience. Once they have access to these communication tools to practice with these honest conversations around difficult or complex situations, what do you imagine or hope next for them?
To be more hopeful, to have a sense of security within self. There's a lot of us, due to the fact that we do have like more of a machinery feel going on during our upbringing and all of our social pressure, and even some of the situations that we have within our systems. It's very important that we actually step back and reflect. Not only that, but be more understanding who we are and looking within before looking within and trying to find the answers within, because everything outside, we mirror who we are. So if we're not at peace within, we are literally attracting what's coming into our lives. And we actually constantly, and like the more we constantly reflect, the more we won't find solutions to it, react. We won't find solutions. So that inner peace is very important. So being hopeful and finding that inner peace from within.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for those beautiful words. And I see that they're really resonating with people who are responding in the chat too. And good news for the people who are commenting that they want to read Beatrice's book, because we do have an announcement at the end of the session. But thank you for sharing, Beatrice. I'm wondering too if we can, and I'll remind anyone who has a question to go ahead and drop it in the Q&A chat so we can make sure to collect those. And now we'll kind of turn our attention a little bit to Wendy. Wendy, I wonder if in a similar fashion you can give our audience a little bit of grounding around the Diversity Institute and how and if the focus and research has changed for the Institute over the last 20 or so years it's been in existence.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. So the Diversity Institute actually, and the work that we were doing on diversity and inclusion started with a tragedy in Montreal. A man walked into a university. He separated the men from the women students, and he shot 27 people, killing 14 women, screaming, "You're all a bunch of feminists." And it's a long, complicated story, but essentially that was a real turning point in Canada on gun control, violence against women, but also attention on women in technology. So the first projects that I was involved in, because I was an IT professor, really focused on women in technology. And quite honestly, the lesson in that is we've been doing a lot. We've been talking about it. We've been running camps. We've been developing programs for 30 years. And there are fewer women in computer science today than there were 30 years ago, and only marginally more in engineering. And part of that, I think, is because we haven't paid enough attention to systems and how systems structure reality. So whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about Black Lives Matter, whether we're talking about diversity and inclusion around newcomers or Indigenous people or others, the fact remains that there are big gaps between what organizations say and what they actually do. And that's, in my view, part of the reason we haven't seen as much change, whether we're talking about any of those populations. So the work that the Diversity Institute does, we're in the business school. And because we're in the business school, it's grounded in sort of commitment to social justice and the SDGs and a belief in equality and so on. But we frame what we do very much in terms of the business case. So how are diversity and inclusion, whether we're talking about government policies, whether we're talking about organizational policies, whether we're talking about individual choices and behaviors, how are diversity and inclusion related to overall goals? So when we talk about government, we look at economic development. If you're excluding half the population, if women are not if women are leaving the workforce because of COVID and lack of access to affordable childcare, that costs everybody. That's, you know, childcare in Canada is not viewed as a women's issue, it's viewed as an economic issue. And we expect, in fact, on Monday, there to be big announcements on investments in better support for parents. If you're looking at organizations, you know, if you're excluding half the population, I live in Toronto, half the population was born outside of Canada, half the population's racialized. If you don't have processes in place for attracting the best and the brightest, regardless of where they come from, how they look, and so on, you're missing out on big talent pools. We know that diversity and inclusion are related to innovation. We know diversity and inclusion are related to employee engagement, satisfaction, and so on. And we know if you screw it up, you can destroy a brand very, very quickly. So we really try to look at it through the lens of how does it advance our goals as individuals and as a community or a society. And what we do is we do research, but we're very much focused on action. So the research isn't just stuff that gets published. It's used to inform policy changes. It's used to test out new approaches to, for example, supporting Black women entrepreneurs or youth entrepreneurs or helping people transition into digital jobs. It's used to help share best practices, because one of the things we found is there are lots of organizations that are doing great things, but there are lots of organizations reinventing the wheel because we don't share enough. So our Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, for example, links organizations across the country to try to build a more inclusive innovation ecosystem for women and other diverse entrepreneurs.
Great, thank you. So many good points in there. And you've sprinkled throughout some of this idea of you know, some of the challenges on moving the needle and making progress from your research, from studies you've conducted, from your experience designing funding mechanisms. Is there any star that stands out as an example of a strategy or an example of something that policies are doing well that we can look to for inspiration?
Yeah, I think the principles are pretty clear. You know, the example I always, there's lots of research in public health, for instance, about how you get people to stop smoking or how you get people to drive less quickly. And one of the things we know is education is the least effective way of shaping change. You know, you can tell me if I eat too much and don't exercise, I'm going to get fat. Zero impact on my life. You can say, don't do drugs. You can say, don't speed. You can say, drive carefully. But those things are far less impactful in driving change than, for example, speed bumps or mandatory seatbelts and airbags or other things that you build into systems that shape people's behavior. So, you know, I'm not the least bit opposed to using regulation, to using carrots and sticks, to using incentives, to using different tools in order to shape behavior. So if we're looking at the business community, for example, telling them diversity and inclusion is good is important, but it's insufficient to change behavior. Having regulatory frameworks like they do in California that say you can't not have any women or diverse people on your boards. So the California legislation is one of my favorite because it doesn't say you have to have 40% or 50%, just says you can't have none. Legislation does have an impact. Government policies do have an impact. If government says we're going to devote a portion of our procurement funding, because in my country and a lot of other countries, government is a huge customer. And if they say we're gonna spend our money on companies that embrace diversity and inclusion, we're gonna spend our money on businesses led by women or diverse people, that has a huge impact in shaping behavior. if consumers, and I think that's one of the really interesting things, for instance, about Black Lives Matter, is if you look at the protesters, they're not all Black. There were a lot of allies that were in those social movements. And I think if you get consumers, if you get citizens to think these things are important and to vote, purchasing decisions, and to join organizations that have commitments to diversity and inclusion, I think those things are really influential. So it's like you have to understand how the system works and where the levers are, and you need metrics and you need accountability and you need leadership in order to move things forward.
Great, thank you for those insightful remarks. And you've started answering this question, but I'll give you a chance to think about any other steps we've been talking about systems and ecosystems of policymakers and community leaders. What about for the individual entrepreneur? Do you have any words of encouragement when they're just starting out thinking about the bigger picture of inclusion in their business strategies?
Well, one of the biggest systems problems, I would argue, is the stereotype. You know, you say name 3 entrepreneurs and people say Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. There's such a strong association between entrepreneurship and tech. We really have to combat that. People don't say Oprah Winfrey. People don't say Kylie Jenner, who was a billionaire at the age of 20, using a Canadian platform, Shopify, to make her fortune. So we have to, you know, that's one of those large issues we have to really combat. We have to really celebrate examples of entrepreneurs in different sectors who look different. We have to learn about their journeys and their stories, and that's really important. But as individuals, the key thing is, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And really, for entrepreneurs, understanding that failure is part of success and that tenacity is one of the most important success factors, I think, is critically important. Being open to learning, because none of us are perfect. And one of the biggest problems entrepreneurs have is, to be successful, you need an ego. You really have to be prepared to keep going when other people are doubting you or not supporting you. At the same time, you have to listen, so that when there are legitimate criticisms, suggestions, advice, and so on, you have to be able to pivot. And finding that balance between personal conviction, confidence, and ego, and but also being willing to take coaching and mentoring and learn and pivot and partner, that for me is one of the biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. Thank you for those wise words to leave with our entrepreneurs. And thank you, Wendy.
And
I know you have to.
I have to go.
Absolutely. You can find out where Wendy is through the links in the chat. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your time today. And let's now, not last but definitely not least, let's turn the conversation to Ana Flores. Ana, you built the first network of Latina influencers to highlight empowering stories of Latinas. What were the points in your professional and personal life that led you to this creation point of the platform?
Oh, I would have to start when the day I was born, I think, because I really feel it all. Definitely who I am has shaped exactly what I am doing now, and how I have been in a way guided and led to come to this point. But first of all, I want to say thank you. It's just, I love just being able to hear Beatrice and Wendy, and I want to say felicidades a todos los que están acá. Qué orgullo estar en este momento con ustedes. Just congratulations to all of you for being here and being part of this cohort. So going back to that, yeah, so I was actually born in Houston. My parents are from El Salvador. And I grew up in El Salvador, and that is important because I definitely grew up with un pie aquí, un pie allá, 1 foot here, 1 foot there. So I grew up understanding and living and being that experience of what now defines so many of Latina women in the United States, right? It's we are from here, we are 100% American, North American, and we are 100% Latinas from whatever identity we choose to identify with, right? For me, it's Salvadoreña. It's also a bit Mexicana because I feel Mexicana. It is, I identify as a Latina woman, but there are so many ways to identify as being a Latina in the United States. And that led me to, I worked in TV production for many years, always within the Hispanic industry, in the US and Mexico, and always creating content by and for the Latinx audience. And when I was already in LA and I had quit my job, and I know that many entrepreneurs start from necessity, and that was my story. I had quit my job to be a full-time mom, and then the recession hit. Many businesses in the United States, especially from Black and Latinx, launched around 2010 as a response to the recession, which gives me a lot of hope for what's happening right now in the pandemic, right? Because we know we're resilient. We have that tenacity Wendy was talking about, and we know how to get ahead when times are tough. So that's when I discovered the world of blogging, and blogging to me became just opened up like this world of possibilities, because we're talking 2008, 2009, where really it was a lot of mom bloggers, tech bloggers, political bloggers that were creating content. But for me, it was this space that democratized our voices, this space that allowed me as a stay-at-home mom facing bankruptcy in the middle of the recession, because my husband had lost his clients and had lost his job. We were both out of work, but finding a space where I didn't need money. I just needed my good ideas, my know-how, and my passion to get up every day and say during nap times, I'm going to create content. And what I did was launched a blog with a good friend called Spanglish Baby, for parents raising bilingual and bicultural kids. Because I knew if that was an issue for me, if that was an important topic for me, there was going to be other Latina moms and other moms in general that were looking for that content. So we launched it with no money. And within a year, it really became a really well-known blog, and was getting a lot of traction. And I had to figure out how to monetize this space. But the beauty of it was that I found a community of other women, of other Latina moms that also found this space, that also wanted to monetize, and that were so passionate, but the only way to do it was funding it, right? So I realized that I could be that intermediate between figuring out how to work with the brands that were so eager in 2010 when the US Census came out in 2010, that helped to start diverting some funds. I'm not going to say funds completely, because we're still nowhere close to the amount of funding that should be allocated to multicultural marketing and specifically to Hispanic audiences. But a lot of the research and the data started coming out of obviously what is happening now, that we are not a minority, that we are the new majority, and how to start reaching out to us via authentic marketing campaigns, right? And include the communities, and how you're going to talk to us and sell to us, basically. So they were trying to figure out also how to do that via this new medium, which was blogging. So I launched Latina Bloggers Connect, again with no money, laptop at home. And basically for the first 10 months, it was only myself. But within the first month, I had Sprint as a client, Neutrogena, McDonald's. It just exploded. And basically what I was doing was connecting them and helping them translate their campaigns into how these would hit home to Latina moms, but more than Latina moms, beyond to the Latina audiences, by choosing to partner with the experts that were already talking authentically and creating connections with those women. Now we know that is influencer marketing. In 2010, it didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist, if we can believe there was a time before that. But this was really the onus of how the business started, which is now called We All Grow Latina Network, because since day one, our motto was, when one grows, we all grow. And our mission is to elevate the voices and stories of Latinas via the power of community. So like I said, it all comes back to who I am, what I want to see in this world, the voices that I want to see elevated. And if we can all build wealth through that, I'm done. I'm happy.
Fantastic. What an inspirational story. You really are a pioneer when we're thinking back to that time frame in the blog sphere and in the world of technology. But really seeing you leverage your community, the resources around you, find the need, find the funding is exactly the kind of story that inspires us. I'm wondering, I'm sure you have a lot of similar stories and stories of the women that you work with and your platform beneficiaries. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the process beyond the funding and the finding the support for the network. But what about the barriers to the network? Did you encounter areas where you were shut out or exclusion or inequality? And can you talk to us about that?
All the time. I mean, I want to see, I'm sure that in this room, we have many entrepreneurs that are the firsts, right? That because what is it? It's that vision that you have that no one has, but that you believe in it so much that no matter what other people are saying, right? Like Wendy was saying, that tenacity, right? And that ego, I'm sorry, you have to believe in that before you have the validation or the proof of your idea or of your vision. And when I mean, talk about a mommy blogger, right? That wanted to launch a business to empower Latina women, Latina moms. I mean, I had no support. And now we're talking about these things. Now we understand the power of Latinas, the power of Black women. And man, did we believe that really straight during the last election season, right? This last election, but we didn't have any data to support. I didn't have any data to support at all. The power of Latina women, the power that we have as consumers, and the power that we have as tastemakers and as culture makers. So from the very beginning, and I have to say it's been 10 years, but we still are having conversations with brands that don't completely understand how to show up authentically, right? That want to dictate, that are very prescriptive. And from the beginning, I believe that was one of the strongest barriers. It was not having the data to speak at those terms with the brands and the media companies that are obviously used to investing their money backed up by very hard ROI and very hard data behind it. So we didn't have that. We didn't have a proof of concept because it was new. And that is the hardest thing to sell. I also didn't have access to investors. I didn't even think about going to investors because I was a mom in the middle of the recession. I didn't have time. I was the one doing the work. I wasn't getting paid and had a team to support the day-to-day while I would spend time in accelerator programs or in Silicon Valley, or because back then there wasn't a lot of access in LA and different places, but to like really have to do the time to even go after those resources and investments. So the company has been completely self-funded for the last 10 years. We figured out a way to do that. And to be honest, I am very happy that we did, because I really believe in what is called builder capitalism, right? Where we have the ownership of what we are creating. And I am not 100% sure that VC funding, well, I know that VC funding doesn't offer that. So for us to honestly build wealth as communities that have been traditionally underrepresented and underserved and underfunded, we have to own what we build.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you for those words of wisdom, truly. I think right now, because we have a few minutes remaining this session until about 12:15, I'd like to invite the audience to include your messages in the Q&A chat, and I'll be happy to share them with our panelists. Looks like a couple of questions have come in. I think this question is, maybe we'll start with Beatrice, and then feel free to chime in, Anna, if you have anything to add. The question is sort of, as we're thinking about self-reflection and tools to best look inside oneself, what are some of the tools you've come across that are particularly effective that you might be able to talk about more?
Okay, great. Thank you for asking. So for internal tools, I would say the number one thing a lot of people would say is meditation. But I'm gonna actually say the first thing is actually watching your thoughts. When you're thinking things, thoughts become things, like people say, but it's actually reality. It's actually reality. When you get upset about something, or you really want to like get to another goal in your life, or like achieve something, you wanna actually set the process of actually deciding what am I trying to accomplish, and actually really ask yourself those questions, like, what am I trying to accomplish? What top 3 things that I'm actually want to do for today? And how am I going to take a break? What is that self-care tools that I'm going to do? So it could be meditation, it can be taking a walk, you can be doing your Qigong practices. But I feel that when we, especially in this going world, we're like run, doing constantly things all the time. But we want to come back to silence, into peace with silence within. Start asking yourself those questions. Okay, well, what am I want to achieve today, and how am I going to move from one point to the next? And when somebody upset you, and if you have like things that like it's ruffling your feathers, you really ask yourself, why am I being mad, upset about it? And really start being more reflective in your steps. These are the easiest things that I would say. Start questioning. If you're upset, walk. And like have conversations and dialogues with yourself.
I'll add, like, I love this topic.
Yeah.
I'll definitely add that to look inside of yourself. I mean, we already have this fabulous tool that I believe is the most important soft skill in business that isn't talked about enough, which is your intuition. I like to call myself an intuitive entrepreneur because I really feel that it has, especially when you're blazing trails, when you're the first in many areas, it is your intuition at the end of the day that's guiding you. We might not have learned to call it that. It might not have the level of respect to appear within in business, but I really feel that intuition is one of the soft skills, so the skills in business that we're going to be hearing over and over again. That is truly what leaders and entrepreneurs access, and how to do that. I mean, everything Beatrice was saying, absolutely. I would add also finding ways to speaking to yourself, right? So what I use is a tool called free flow writing. So it's just this kind of getting into that present moment and to that meditative state, just taking a few deep breaths, putting a pen and paper, not typing it on your phone or anything, pen and paper. It's just so powerful to how also you receive back the messages that you are giving yourself, right? So it's you ask those questions. The whys are so important because it removes you from a victim mentality to an actually empowered place where you are learning lessons for anything that it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, right? It's another way to learn a lesson. So asking those questions and just allowing whatever comes out without editing it to come out, and trusting what it is that is already inside of you.
Such great reminders. Thank you so much for sharing, Beatrice and Anna, about these important reminders of some of the basics, but then a lot of the tools around intentionality, because that's really what it is. Setting aside the space for your own mind, your own thoughts, getting feedback from others. So thank you for sharing that. We have a couple of questions that are kind of around inclusion starting at home. And Camila, if I'm not phrasing your question correctly, please feel free to put it in the chat. But kind of how we start with the family and with children, around the topics of inclusion. Does anyone want to take that question?
Well, I'm a mom to a 13-year-old now, and we live in LA. She was born in LA and grew up in LA, but her dad is Mexican. I'm Salvadorian. Her dad is actually Mexican Dutch. So she has a few diverse countries in her background, but she really feels she's from LA. And I remember, for me, obviously, since the day she was born, I was speaking Spanish to her, and it was very important to me that she learned Spanish, and that for me, it was the main reason was that she wouldn't have any barrier with her abuelita and her abuelos, in El Salvador and in Mexico, and with her cousins, and that she could have this direct connection. But more than anything is to give her those very important, and we know 21st century skills, and that learning two languages and more, which to me, it's still unbelievable that in a country as diverse as the United States, we only value speaking English, right? When knowing any second language, especially Spanish, can allow you, can open doors to almost 50% of the world. So just starting with that, knowing that there are different ways to say a word, different ways to bring perspectives to the way we see things, that starts opening up, right, the world and how we see the world. And I remember one day she was about 5 or 6 years old. She came back from school telling me, she's like, do you know in LA we speak all the languages of the world? And it's true, every single language. And I even believe the indigenous language, many of them are represented in Los Angeles in one way, shape, or form. So just even having that diversity when it comes to culture, but also when it comes to she's had since she was little, in kindergarten, I believe, one of her classmates had 2 dads. She had another one with 2 moms, right? So that just starts opening up different conversations for her to understand that we had, you know, that she lives in a very diverse world, and just coming from that place. Because I have to say, and I know that, you know, our audience here, mostly in Latin America, I come from El Salvador, which is not a diverse country, where Black citizens were not allowed, right? And I grew up believing and being told that there was no Black Salvadorians, and it's not true. So we have to start dismantling, and a highly Catholic country. So I didn't grow up around diversity. I had to learn. I had to do the hard work as soon as I went into college in the US, to learn. And that is what we all have to do to dismantle racism and to dismantle stereotypes, and then bring that back to our children.
I do have a few things that that's really amazing, Anna. Though you touch on really great points. Inclusion. Another thing I really say, and I address it in my book and a lot of the programs that I do. Actually hearing and listening to each other. And as a family unit, I know that, like, even with my siblings, my brothers and sisters, we are totally different people. Even though we're from the same culture and everything, we're all different people. And I noticed that, like, how we sometimes, we're too close to engage. So we don't really get to know our family members because of the busy world that we live in. And I think that sometimes that breakdown happened within families because of that. And then now it bleeds through it bleeds through through societies and systems. And I feel like another thing that will be really important is to start to really listen to and within the homes, and start to really acknowledge the characteristics of how we move, what things light us up, what don't light us up. Because sometimes even within our family, we have perceptions on how we want a person to become, not what they really are. And, like, really acknowledging the beauty of true diversity within that as well. So that's one of the things that I just wanted to just touch on that.
There's so much truth in those statements that you've all made. I feel like we could explore this conversation for so much longer. We are unfortunately out of time, but I wanted to thank both Beatrice and Anna, and in absentia, Wendy, for taking the time today and sharing your valuable advice, your personal stories, your time. We're going to end the session here, but you know, we really appreciated the time that you had with us today. For those in the audience who want to take a deeper dive into ways to overcome unseen barriers, you can download a digital copy of Beatrice's book. Just scan the QR code in your swag bag on the navigation bar in BFairs. You can also keep learning about our speakers through their websites and social media that have been dropped into the chat, and also in the speaker profiles tab. Thank you again, ladies. And now I would like to introduce you to Alejandro Torino, who is a program coordinator on the YLAI team with IREX, who has a special message to share before we end this session and move on to the Dream Team sessions. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks to all the speakers. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm Alejandro Torino. I'm a program coordinator here on the YLAI team, and I work a lot with alumni and congressional engagement. Speaking of which, you know, the YLAI program would not be possible without the strong bipartisan support it receives from members of the United States Congress. This year, YLAI Innovators worked with organizations based in congressional constituencies across the country. Many of these were, of course, in the state of Texas, whose 28th district is represented by the Honorable Congressman Henry Cuellar. As a leader on US foreign policy towards the region, Congressman Cuellar has a special connection to Latin America and the Caribbean. The Congressman is unfortunately not able to join us today here live. However, he does send the following congratulatory message to the entire YLAI Innovators cohort and to those fellows who worked with Texas-based host organizations. So I believe my friend Umair has that message queued up. Oh, Umair, I think your sound is off on the video.
Is incredible. incredible to see Texan entrepreneurs find ways to persevere, lead, teach, and be excellent ambassadors for our state in the process. I also want to congratulate you all for successfully completing your YLAI fellowship. It's been worth it. I know it's been a long journey filled with challenges, learning experiences, and a lot of hard work. Your perseverance and your tenacity have paid off, and I'm thrilled to be addressing you all as YLAI Fellowship alumni. I also want to thank and be very specific to all those fellows who have worked with the Texan enterprises. As pioneer leaders, your invaluable expertise and skills have bolstered our local communities and our businesses and our entrepreneurs. And I want to say thank you for that. As a representative of our community on the U.S.-Mexico border, I understand the importance of supporting entrepreneurs and creating economic ties between small businesses in the United States and Latin America. After all, 40% of all the U.S. exports go to Latin America. Exchange and working together with the small business owners is essential to maintaining a safe, prosperous, globally competitive Western Hemisphere. Our neighbors to the south are our friends and our alliances. I have no doubt that you will apply what you have learned to strengthen both your business and our communities. I also hope that you will stay in touch and continue working together with your new American colleagues. The strength of the YLAI Fellowship lies in those lasting friendships and working together. So keep those ties together. As you become a YLI alumni, I hope that you take a piece of the United States with you. I hope your leadership, determination reflect what you've learned in the spirit of this program. Once again, I want to say congratulations. And always remember, don't wait for change. Create change. God bless.
Fantastic. What a great message from Congressman Cukier. Before we transition into the next part of Closing Forum, which are, of course, the Dream Team sessions, I have a few instructions to share with you all. So we have 4 fellows who are going to be presenting with their host supervisor or mentor about a key learning skill or tool developed throughout their fellowship. You will choose one of the 4 concurrent sessions to attend, so they're all going on at the same time. Take a look at the agenda and see which topic you're most interested in learning more about, and choose that session to join. We know it's a tough choice because there's 4 really great topics, but don't worry, all the sessions will be recorded, so you'll be able to get access to those later. We hope you enjoy listening to your peers as they share their stories, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you.